Every man who has ever commanded genuine respect had four things under control. Not talent, not luck, not the right connections, or the right timing, or the right circumstances. Four internal disciplines that most men never fully develop because they look simple from the outside and are extraordinarily difficult from the inside. Machiavelli spent his entire career studying men who held power, men who kept it, and men who lost it. And what he found, documented in courts and councils and the private correspondence of princes, was that the difference between the men who commanded rooms and the men who were merely present in them almost always came down to the same four things: how they used their time, how they used their words, how they handled the moments when everything in them wanted to react, and who they gave their trust to. Four disciplines, four mastered things. And the man who has genuinely mastered all four moves through the world in a way that most men only observe from the outside. Stay until the very end, because the fourth mastery is the one that makes the other three worth anything at all. Most men think respect is given, that it arrives as a response to something visible. A title, an achievement, a display of capability that the room has no choice but to acknowledge. But real respect, the kind that stays when the title is gone and the achievement is old news, is not given. It is recognized. It is the specific recognition that happens in the presence of a man who has built something internally that most men have not. And that recognition cannot be manufactured through performance. It can only be earned through mastery of time, of tongue, of temper, of trust. In the next 20 minutes, we are going through all four, what mastering each one actually means, what it costs, what it produces, and why Machiavelli would tell every man in your position exactly what he told the princes he advised. Begin with these. Everything else follows. The first mastery is time, and it begins with a truth that most men resist because it is uncomfortable. Your time is the most honest indicator of what you actually value. Not what you say you value, not what you believe you value, what you actually allow to consume your hours. Most men, if they examine this honestly, would find a significant gap between what they say matters and where their time is actually going. The conversation that consumed 2 hours and produced nothing. The distraction they return to multiple times a day that has never once moved their life forward. The obligation they carry that was never theirs to carry, but that they never consciously set down. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who allows others to determine how his hours are spent has handed over the most fundamental form of sovereignty available to any man. And he is right, because the man who controls his time controls what he becomes, and the man who does not controls nothing else that matters. Mastering your time is not about productivity systems. It is about the cold, uncomfortable audit of where your hours are actually going, and the equally uncomfortable process of reclaiming them from everything that never deserved them. Every hour you reclaim from noise and obligation and the management of other people's priorities is an hour that compounds. That builds something. That moves you from where you are toward where you decided you are going. The man who has mastered his time is immediately visible in any room, not because he is busy, because he is purposeful. There is a quality of intention in how he moves that men who are simply occupied never have. And rooms respond to intention the way they respond to nothing else. With attention. The second mastery is the tongue. And it is the one most men underestimate until they have lost something significant because of what they said. Here is what your tongue does when you have not mastered it. It tells people what moves you. Every time you speak too quickly in a heated moment, you hand information to whoever is watching about exactly where your edges are. It tells people what you fear. The over-explanation of a decision tells anyone paying attention that you need their approval of it. The defensiveness in your response to a challenge tells them the challenge found something. It tells people what you want. The premature announcement of your goals gives everyone who hears them the ability to form an opinion about whether you will achieve them, which is an opinion you should never be allowing anyone to form until the outcome makes it irrelevant. Machiavelli was precise about this. He wrote that the most powerful men he observed spoke less than they knew and knew less than they revealed. The tongue of the unmastered man is a door that is always open. The tongue of the mastered man is a door that only opens with intention, not because he has nothing to say, because he understands that every word he speaks is information about his interior, and his interior is the most strategic asset he possesses. Mastering your tongue means developing the discipline of the pause, the deliberate space between the thought and the word. In that space, you make a decision about whether what you are about to say serves you or simply satisfies the impulse to speak. Most of what most men say does not survive that pause, and the words that do survive it carry the weight of everything that was considered and not said. That weight is what makes a man's words worth listening to. not volume, not speed. Wait, the third mastery is temper. And this is where most men fall apart. Not in the comfortable moments. In the specific moments designed to disrupt them. The comment calibrated to produce a reaction. The situation engineered to make composure impossible. The person who knows exactly which direction to push to make you predictable. These moments test something that cannot be faked. Your relationship with your own emotional interior. Most men have never fully made this relationship. They react from patterns built over years. From old wounds that still have access to the present. From pride that needs the room to know it has been insulted. From the specific vulnerability of a man who has not yet separated his sense of himself from what the room is doing with it. Machiavelli studied rulers who lost everything in moments of unmastered temper. Men who had spent years building exactly the right position, only to surrender it in a single visible reaction that told their enemies everything they needed to know. Where the opening was, how to use it, when to push. The man who has mastered his temper gives none of this away, not because he feels nothing, because he has developed the specific discipline of letting what he feels pass through him privately before it becomes visible publicly. The heat is real. The pause is the mastery. In that pause, something happens that most people never experience. The emotion delivers its information. The anger tells you what was crossed. The frustration tells you what is not working. The resentment tells you what boundary has been ignored. All of it is information. And the man who can receive that information without immediately converting it into display is the man who can then choose what to do with it. Deliberately, strategically, at a time and in a manner of his choosing, rather than the time and manner that the moment chose for him. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every day of his life as emperor. He was tested constantly. He felt everything. He is documented as having felt anger and frustration, and the specific exhaustion of a man who dealt with an unending supply of human difficulty. But he developed through decades of private practice the ability to receive what he felt and respond from a considered place rather than an automatic one. And that ability made him, in the judgment of everyone who studied his reign, almost impossible to destabilize. That is what mastered temper produces. Not a cold man, an undestabilizable one. The fourth mastery is trust, and it is the most important of the four. Because without mastered trust, the other three build something that can still be destroyed from inside. Most men make their worst decisions, not in their relationship with the world, but in their relationship with who they allow into their interior, who they tell what they are building, who they give access to the real version of themselves rather than the public version, who they allow to see where they are uncertain, where they are afraid, where they are further from what they want than they appear. These decisions determine everything, because the people you give that access to either protect what they are given or they spend it. And the man who has not mastered trust gives this access too easily, too quickly, based on the performance of trustworthiness, rather than the demonstrated evidence of it. Machiavelli was relentless on this point. He wrote that more princes fell through misplaced trust than through any form of external opposition. Because the opposition you can see you can prepare for. The opposition that comes from inside the circle you built is the opposition that takes everything. Mastering trust does not mean trusting no one. It means building a specific discipline for how trust is extended. Slowly, based on evidence accumulated over time in situations that cost something. Not based on how someone makes you feel. Not based on how compelling their loyalty appears. Based on the cold record of what they have done when doing the right thing was inconvenient for them. That record takes time to build. And the man who is unwilling to wait for it pays the specific price of misplaced trust again and again. In different phases, with the same cost. Here is what these four masteries produce together. A man who controls where his hours go produces something that men who are simply busy never produce. Compounding. Each hour directed intentionally builds on the last. And the man who has done this for years arrives at places that men who spent the same hours on noise can only observe from the outside. A man who has mastered his tongue produces something that volume never produces. Credibility. When he speaks, people listen, not because he is loud, but because he is rare. The man who says less and means more is a man whose words carry weight that most voices never develop. A man who has mastered his temper produces something that reactivity destroys. Strategic advantage. He sees clearly when others are clouded. He chooses deliberately when others are compelled. He moves at his own pace when others are being moved at theirs. And a man who has mastered his trust produces the rarest thing of all. A genuine circle. Small, durable, built on evidence rather than feeling, and worth more in the moments that actually matter than any number of connections built on proximity and performance. Machiavelli did not write about these four disciplines as theory. He observed them in the men who lasted. across courts and centuries and political conditions that destroyed everyone who had not built these things before the storm arrived. The men who fell were almost always men who had neglected one of the four. Time scattered across things that never mattered. Tongue that told the wrong people the wrong things at the wrong moment. Temper that surrendered strategic advantage for the satisfaction of being visibly offended. Trust extended to people who had not earned it and could not hold it. The men who lasted had mastered all four. And the world, which is indifferent to almost everything, rearranged itself accordingly. 4 disciplines, not 4 talents, not 4 personality traits that some men have and others do not. 4 practices that can be built by any man willing to do the work of building them. In private, over time, without applause. Begin with the one that feels most absent. Build it quietly, and watch what changes when a man who controls his time, his tongue, his temper, and his trust walks into a room. The room feels it before he speaks. Because some things cannot be performed, they can only be built, and the built thing announces itself without any help from the man who built it. If this gave you something to start, subscribe. This channel is for men building what cannot be performed. Drop this in the comments if you know which of the 4 you need to build first. I am building all 4.